Gospel this morning comes from Matthew 28, verses 1 through 10. As we turn to our scriptures, more or less turn to God in prayer. Gracious, loving, and risen Savior, send your Spirit upon us to boldly fill us to receive this message today. We've heard this story so many times, but open our hearts. Let us hear it fresh, like a story being told to a child for the first time. Give us anxious ears to listen, and to take what you have to tell us. Take it out in the world and spread it and tell the story. It's in Jesus' holy and risen name I pray. Amen. Listen to this story. After the Sabbath, at dawn on the first day of the week, Mary Magdalene and the other Mary went to look at the tomb. There was a violent earthquake, for an angel of the Lord came down from heaven and, going to the tomb, rolled back the stone and sat on it. His appearance was like lightning, and his clothes were white as snow. The guards were so afraid of him that they shook and they became like dead men. The angel said to the woman, "Do not be afraid, for I know that you are looking for Jesus who was crucified. He is not here. He has risen, just as he said. Come and see the place where he lay. Then go quickly and tell his disciples, he has risen from the dead and is going ahead of you into Galilee. There you will see him. Now I have told you." So the women hurried away from the tomb, afraid yet filled with joy, and ran to tell his disciples. Suddenly Jesus met them. "Greetings," he said. They came to him, clasped his feet, and worshipped him. Then Jesus said to them, "Do not be afraid. Go and tell my brothers to go to Galilee. They will see me there." The word of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Tell me a story. About what? About when Jesus came back alive. Now that is a good one, isn't it? I'm a parent, so I'm very much in the storytelling business. You and I are very much in the storytelling practice too. As a church, we tell and retell and tell and retell these faith stories that speak truth about God and God's covenant of love with God's people. We tell them again and again. We tell them again and again to ears that will listen until they become known to those ears. And then that person can go tell someone else the story again and again until they listen and know it. Our stories really are the best stories, I have to say. And this story today, well, it's the greatest. The world is a toddler. Short attention span, wants to do its best, listens when there's something good that you have to hear. Tell me a story. About what? About when Jesus came back. Now that is the very best story. Well, Jesus died, and then they took his body and they put it in a cave, and they covered it up with a big old rock so that nobody could get in and nobody could get out. Well, why did they do that? They just wanted to make doubly sure that nobody could get in and nobody could get out. What happens next? Now, being able to answer what happens next is crucial in telling a good story, isn't it? Really, that's how you know you've got them. You have got their attention. They have to know what happens next. What happens next? Oh, I am so glad you asked. So two girls, both of them named Mary, got up really, really early in the morning, the first chance that they could. Maybe it was the morning even, just like this one outside. They went to the giant rock that was covering up the cave. And then there was a huge earthquake. And when they gathered themselves after the earthquake, they looked around and there was an angel sitting on top of the big rock. An angel? An angel. What did he say? What did he do? Well, the guards are standing over the big rock. Will they be saying, so scared? They had never been so scared in all of their lives. And then he told the women, he said, do not be afraid. That he knows that they are looking for Jesus. But then he said, he's not here. Where is he? He said, come check out where he was laying. He's alive. And he has a head start on you. So you've got to go. Run. And then what happened? So they went. They ran and ran as fast as they could, and they were so filled with fear, but mostly joy, that they didn't even get tired as they were running. It was like they were running on air. They ran until they ran smack right into a person. Who was it? Guess who it was? Jesus. Yes, he was alive. What happens next? Now, isn't that the question? What happens next? I find myself getting better and better at telling stories and retelling stories. But it seems with every story I tell, I finally get to the point where I just have to say, and they lived happily ever after. The end. But how? How do they live happily ever after? And why? What happens next? Inserting ourselves into the story, being in the story, being there, we do live happily ever after, don't we? Because Jesus is alive and the tomb is empty, it is all because Jesus lives that we are alive. We are happily ever after. But there's so much more to this resurrection story, and that is why we are here now. Because he lives, we live. Because he was raised, we too are raised. Because his story goes on, so can ours. What happens next in the story is that you and I and the whole rest of the world are invited into the Easter story. We ourselves are characters that help to answer the question to the anxious listener, what happens next? Because of Easter, because of the awesome and earth-quaking power of grace and the truth of the resurrection, you get to live a higher up life, lifted up with Jesus. Now, Jesus really was an awesome storyteller, wasn't he? The stories Jesus told over and over again, they were stories about higher things, parables about the kingdom, stories that always pointed up to a higher plane than where he and the people listening stood. Those stories, these stories, resurrection stories, are the stories the church today needs to be telling a world craving something that's higher up than the plane that we live on here and now, this present reality. We, because of Jesus and the power of the resurrection, we have been given the privilege as a church and the responsibility to live in the dust and the mud of the world, just like Jesus did, but to always have our heads up, looking up, always up to where heaven is, and seeking that which is up there, above. The church, this church, now maybe more than ever needs to be unafraid to tell the stories of hope to the hopeless, of peace to an unsettled and violently shaken world and person, of healing to the sick, of resurrection to those who are dead inside. I see a world that is yearning for good news and for a great, great story to be told to them. Sisters, brothers, we have that story to tell. It is ours for the telling, and it is our charge and our call to tell it again and again and again until they learn it, and then they can tell it. We are the storytellers for the world. And we tell the story in everything we do. Every decision that this church makes in sure knowledge that Jesus Christ is resurrected, and therefore anything is possible. The mission of the church, of this church, is not disconnected from the amazing story of the resurrection of Jesus and that anything is possible. We clothe and feed the hungry as part of our ministry because Jesus told us to do that. And Jesus is alive. And he says it is possible to feed and clothe the world. We begin here teaching babies spiritual formation and to tell them the stories of the faith because Jesus told us to do that. And they have listening ears. And anything is possible. We fearlessly speak the language of legacy, of leaving great things behind for the church to live on for years and years in this world because Jesus lives on forever and ever. And that's what he taught us to do. We are the church. We are the legacy of the risen Jesus Christ left on this earth to do his work. We are the church. We are the charged storytellers of the resurrected good news. Tell me a story. About what? About when Jesus came back alive.